Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. I am thrilled to be joined again by a very special guest. She is back for round 3. Super excited for this. Please welcome Linda Conway. Hey Linda.
Hello, Demi. Thank you again for having me back. It's just always such a pleasure to be on this podcast. And the previous 2 podcasts have been quite deep. we were
Fantastic. Well, I'm so excited you're joining me again and cannot believe we are already into 2023. That's crazy. Do you have any big goals for this year?
Well, I think the biggest goal for me is probably to use my vocal ability a lot more and maybe sing a lot more and maybe, who knows, release some music. But we'll see where 2023 takes me.
Okay, I'm excited. If you ever want to co-write a song, I'm here.
Well, I know if I need a good bridge, I know where to go.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have you back again. Today, we are going to be chatting all about professionalism. This is a very important topic. And now that we're in the new year, being professional right off the bat, very important. Do not mess up. Do not, make yourself have a bad look anywhere. To all of you listening, always put your best foot forward. And so today, Linda and I are going to be talking all about professionalism to hopefully give you some tips and inspire you to be more professional every single day. So to kick off things, Linda, please read a fantastic quote.
Yeah, the quote I have is, once you realize that you're in something you've always wanted and you don't want to lose it, you behave differently. And that means the integrity, the professionalism, and knowing what's right from wrong, and still making choices that you probably wouldn't have made. And that's from Paul Anka.
This is super dense, but every single word is important. So, Linda, what does this quote mean to you?
I don't know. I think it, like, for example, if I wanted to be a professional singer songwriter in that kind of way, like being professional, I suppose, would mean turning up on time, being respectful to who you're working with, communicating well with them, um, and I suppose putting your personal preferences and your personal view on something aside, because what you might feel personally is maybe not what's needed in a professional capacity. There's a lot in that again, that like you would make choices you probably wouldn't have made. Do you know, that's for the profession, you have to make sacrifices that you wouldn't maybe necessarily have done personally. So that's where that's where my brain's going at the minute.
I love that so much. I think for me, it's like this first part. Like, once you're involved in something you've always wanted to do, you change. I love music. I'm so honored to be a songwriter. I'm so blessed to be part of this industry. And now that I'm in it, I do not plan on blowing my chances to have a future in the music industry because I think like you have to be professional. It's a business. Yes, music is an art, but the music industry is an industry and industry is a business. And I think that once you get lucky enough to be involved in something you want to be in, be the music industry as well as you start to like notice your behavior and always try to put your best foot forward, be respectful, like don't do anything that could give you a bad reputation because there are so many people in the music industry trying to make careers for themselves and I can think of many people that I'm not going to name drop, but many people who have done things that just completely wrecked their careers. Like things that were so unprofessional, so disrespectful that just they got canceled and there goes their career. And so I think that it's so important to remain mindful of the fact that you're in a business and every connection you have with publicists and managers and collaborators. It's though you may have, personal friendships with them, like at the end of the day, like you're part of business relationships and the respect goes both ways, right? You want to be respected by people. You want people to treat you professionally. At the same time, you need to deliver that and establish for yourself, hey, I'm a professional person because people will respect you, people will notice you, you'll stand out from the crowd, and you'll just be way better off than if you engage in unprofessional behavior.
I think when you're with friends, if you're, like in the music industry, if you're with your friends, sometimes you're not professional because you're with your friends and you can be who you are, or you can be, you can say whatever in confidence to a friend or have an open debate. But when you're in the professional realm of a music industry and going for interviews and releasing songs, and you want your brand to be something that's a positive thing, and you want to look good because you care about what you're doing, and it's not necessarily like the way you behave is totally different, and you have to take into consideration other people's feelings and other people's communities and other all these kind of things. Like, I think of the Morgan Wallen thing is sticking out at me when he used a word he shouldn't have used, and that created a lot of, he was banned from a lot of things just for saying one specific word, and it really, well, I don't think it did anything negative for his career because his music started to sell a lot better after that incident than it did before. Um, but still, it's, being professional is, I suppose, as we did a podcast on kindness, so it probably relates a little bit. Being professional and the way you conduct yourself in business is very important, and it will bring more business and you'll open more doors if you behave respectfully to everyone in every community and every person you come into contact with. Um, it'll just increase your chances, and then word of mouth will spread that that's how you are and you're very professional, and it would create more work for you in the long run than if you weren't. I know a few people in the industry who they're not very professional at all, and the way they deal with anybody, um, and they're trying to make it in the music industry, and they are getting absolutely nowhere. Um, Absolutely nowhere. In fact, they're getting blocked right, left, and centre from everybody's social media and stuff. It's ridiculous what's happening. Um, but he is so unprofessional, like to everyone and anyone that he comes into contact with, and he's getting nowhere, and he wants to be a singer songwriter. So you kind of go, okay, I don't think that's going to happen for you somehow, because, like, change your attitude, change the way you talk to people, and you might open a couple of doors, but keep going where you're going, and no. So yeah, it's professionalism is, I suppose, it's training yourself to be respectful to everyone you come into contact with.
Absolutely. So, in the time that we have during this chat, I want to just touch on some qualities that link to professionalism. So, we're talking about being professional, but what are some things that we can personally do to achieve that? And a huge one for me, huge, especially because I host a podcast, be reliable. If you have an interview with somebody, if you are given the opportunity, to do an interview or, like appear at a live show or something, you need to be someone that's reliable because if someone sets time aside for you to give you an opportunity, whether that be virtually or in person, and you're not a reliable person, that's gonna one, like reflect back on the person who's giving you the opportunity, wasted their time. Nobody wants to waste anybody's time. Two, no one's gonna like, want to give you opportunities again if you don't show up. You're like, canceling multiple times. I understand things happen and you need to like switch things around. That's definitely happened to me before. But if it gets to like three, four times when you're canceling 10 minutes before, and you're not reliable to show up and be prepared for things and all of that, that just like makes me weary to work with people because I'm putting my time on the line and my reputation on the line as well. And so I think being reliable is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's. I know people have lives and stuff, so just to let people know if you can't do, but if you make an appointment with someone, keeping it is probably, that's probably high up there on what professionalism is. Um, Another one is probably I think being respectful, as I mentioned. Um, being respectful during your interviews was being respectful to the artist and the artist being respectful back, because when you have that respect and you have that um, joint respect and mutual respect for each other, then the interview goes better, and you have something that will last and will people will like to listen to and want to listen to, and then you'll be invited back, and all those things. It kind of mutual respect is something that will last in business, I think, and it I suppose it creates a kind environment to be in.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I love that point about, you getting welcome back places and getting more opportunities. That's completely right. If you're a reliable person and you're a professional person and respectful, then people will be more than happy to have you back to things and help you out later on. Because if they did it once, I'm pretty sure they'll do it again if you're a good person and professional. And, the thing with being reliable is like, I've been in situations where people have contacted me sort of like last minute y kind of things like, hey, like I need somebody to do this thing, can you do it? And if I say yes, I will do it, believe me, like I will get it to you or I will be there, like unless something really bad happens, I'll let you know in advance, but I'm not going to ghost, I'm not going to blow you off. And like I established that reputation for myself so people know like, hey, like Demi will definitely like, we can rely on her if we need her to do something, and turnaround time will be quick and all of those things. And I think paired with being reliable is also accountability. And I think that you need to hold yourself accountable for things, and being able to hold others accountable for things. That's all about being professional. Like, if you do something that maybe wasn't the right thing to do, like if you said something that you maybe shouldn't have said, if you posted something on social media that maybe you shouldn't have posted, apologize to people, hold yourself accountable. Don't do a whole blaming thing and point your fingers at other people and like, try to project it on other people when you were responsible for it. Like taking responsibility for your actions is really important because nobody's perfect and nobody is expected to be perfect. But I think the thing that separates professional people from people who aren't are the people who stand up and say like, oh, you know what, maybe that wasn't right. And I apologize and I'll do better, and accepting that. And the people who aren't as professional will just like refuse to accept the fact that they did anything wrong and will not take responsibility.
Yeah, I think accountability is a big factor, and you know, I suppose being accountable to yourself, and we always learn. Every day is a learning experience, and if you're willing and you're an ultimate professional, you will learn from your experiences and you will take that on board. And then the next time that situation happens again, it's experience and it's building up experience, and you'll be able to learn from your experiences before. And it's a good thing to bring forward, um, to learn all those lessons, because, as you said, we're all human. Nobody's perfect, and we all have bad days, and we all have days where we just can't be bothered to do anything, and we don't want to do anything. We're tired. We could be anything could be happening to us. We could be ill. We could have worries that we're just thinking about. It's all these things. But as I suppose in the music industry goes, the show must go on. So you just kind of supposed to try and separate that from what you're wanting to do and what the task is at hand. And then once that role or task is finished, you can then, in your own time, deal with whatever it is that's going on in your mind or going on in your life. But being professional is um, something that's very, very important. And I suppose um, it can mean different things to different people as well, I think. But yeah, I suppose being respectful and dealing with the job and the reason that you're there and the reason you're doing it for should probably be your primary focus. Um, yeah, and I think that's professional is so different from personal. Like, I think sometimes those two lines can be very blurred as to what professionalism is and what personal is. Sometimes that can be very blurred. And I think it's probably very important to separate the two.
Yeah, very great point. I'm very, very happy you brought up that point because I think in the music industry, that can be difficult at times, especially for songwriters and artists. Our personal lives is like basically our art, right? Like, especially for me, like all of my songs are so personal. And even in my business communications and interviews and, putting myself out there or playing shows, like I'm very present and I'm very personable. But I think that I always have to remind myself that just because my songs are personal and I'm talking about these personal things in interviews, the communication level must stay business related. And I've had some communications that I had to like set boundaries on because people were crossing lines with me and it was getting really uncomfortable. And it's like, listen, like just because I speak about these things in my songs, like respect people's boundaries. Like that's another thing with being professional, like respecting people's boundaries. And the communications like need to be professional. Like if you're sending somebody an email, make it professional, communicate on a timely basis, and just make sure that the tone is professional and tying into like the personal side and emotional side sometimes there are situations that can get under your skin. But I think a part about being professional is like staying calm in all circumstances. And like, even if you're like boiling on the inside and like completely furious, you need to find a way of managing that. Because when you're doing business communications, like I'm not trying to stir the pot and I'm not trying to cause problems or drama. And so keeping your tone and addressing things in a professional way is really important. And so for me, like when people cross my boundaries, like I'll make it a point like, I think, maybe we should take a step back and make these communications a little more professional and not, go to these personal places because it's making me uncomfortable, just like being open about it. But at the same time, like if there's people who, like we talked about this a little bit in the kindness episode, like if people just completely mistreat you, you have to stand up for yourself, and not like, turn away from what you believe as being kind. But in the professional world, you kind of have to use your voice a little bit because you shouldn't be in positions, especially business situations, that leave you feeling uncomfortable, even if you're that kind person. Being kind doesn't mean sacrificing your personal beliefs and your morals and all of that for certain people. And so that's important as well.
Absolutely, and I think you brought up a very good point there when a songwriter talks about their personal life. Like that's what you write about. You write like you wear your heart on your sleeve. I mean, I know some of the songs I wrote was about the death of my mother, and that's something that has a very profound impact. So if you're singing in a professional capacity, like you're gigging or whatever, and you're singing to an audience, and someone in that audience has gone through exactly that, that's not personal, or that's not professional for that person. It's very personal. It's very personal to you. So in that, you're in a very professional setting, but you're making a very personal connection with someone because you like your fans are like, oh, I feel that, and they might not have anybody talking about that with them. So like it's very, I think it's a very kind of difficult line. I think because I know there's a lot of, I suppose, fans that have maybe sometimes have crossed the boundaries because you don't know someone personally. You know their songs, you might know that you might have listened to their interviews, but you might not know them on a personal level. You won't have, you won't have been to their house for dinner, and you won't have had all these long talks. You've just listened to their EP, but it's had a profound effect on you, and that maybe is, it's very different. It's a very kind of, I suppose, very difficult to stay professional in that sense because a lot of the songwriting is very personal and can hit home to a lot of people who are listening to you. And I've seen that in a lot of, I've seen that with a lot of people. Sometimes like are like, I don't want to call them stalkers, but maybe it is stalkers. Like some people will follow an artist round, and the artist is their best friend, and so their number one fan, and all these kind of things that you think, well, you might not know them on a personal level, and it's a business to them, but it kind of crosses into something that can become personal.
Yeah. No, you took this to a really interesting place. The fan interactions didn't even cross my mind. But that's so true. There's mainstream artists who I know of that don't do meet and greets anymore because fans cross lines and made them feel uncomfortable. And I think like even social media presence, you never know someone truly unless you're in their personal life. And so, like, for me, like, I'm very open on my social media. I'm really open in my interviews. And, just through hosting this podcast, like, people get to know me pretty well. But getting to know somebody who's, public persona is not their personal life. There's so much of my life that I do not talk about online and to anybody businessy, because I shouldn't be obligated to do that. And people who make you feel obligated to do that, those are major red flags to me because, like, I've been in situations where I felt like, I was pressured to talk about things I didn't feel comfortable talking about. I was in situations that made me like really uncomfortable and sometimes inferior. And like, I was being forced to be overly vulnerable in situations I didn't want to be. And I think like I conducted myself well in those situations by, trying to set boundaries and separate myself and reestablish healthier business relationships. But everybody faces that, especially in the music industry, because, songwriters open up so much. And I cannot blame the people who are curious. Like maybe you're curious to know about someone's life more. I don't blame you for being curious, but you can't cross the lines. You can be like thinking to yourself, oh, I wonder, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean you have to ask those questions and, make people feel uncomfortable and cross the lines. So I think like boundaries are extremely important. And people who are in the arts and in the public eye, it's really hard to sometimes forget that these are people that you literally have never met in person and don't know personally, despite how much they share on social media and in their music.
Well, I mean, that's very, very true, and I suppose trying to keep professionalism in that situation can be very, very tough and very, very difficult. I mean, not all people are like that, but like, because I know myself, I do Voice of a Woman and I speak to a lot of artists, and we do go deep into conversations about everything, and you do develop friendships as the time goes on, but um, you're not always, it's not like a friend thing. You're not like having dinner with them, you're interviewing them about their career and you're promoting a song, and it is business in that sense. Um, and I keep that in my mind, and it's like we're not. I suppose a lot of them are we're not friends with them, and you have to kind of keep that distance a little bit. And as well as a fan, I always think there's a lot of fans who get very passionate. I'll say, I'll be diplomatic and say they get very passionate. But me as a music fan, I love music, and when an artist sings a song that really really gets me in a very personal level. I'm very aware of the fact that, I don't want to be like opening my heart and soul because it's not their, they're not a psychotherapist, they're not a doctor, they're not my mother, they're not my father, they're not, my best friend or whatever. But I'm very aware of, I want to tell them how that song has profoundly affected me. Um, because that's what a songwriter loves to hear, and that's the whole point of music. It's that connection, it's that emotional connection. It can heal, it can do all those things, but to take it back to the business side of things and what they're trying to do in career wise, um, that's a very, very different thing, and it's very opposite from professionalism, personalism. Yeah, it's very there's very two. I've always said that as well in interviews. Like I've said that to people. How do you define as a songwriter yourself? How do you, when you're sitting in a room writing a very personal song, very very personal song, and then you take that and it becomes a product because it's a business, and you have to then go and sell that product and like everybody, to make people buy it, to make people take that product in and to put a brand on it. And that's a very different headspace altogether. And those two things are very conflicting. And to kind of make that work, it's a very difficult thing to be an independent musician in that sense, to get that business head on from the personal side of it. And I think it's the same for fandoms, and it's the same for when people are interviewing artists, and it's kind of suppose where the boundaries, I suppose you do need to have good boundaries in that sense to kind of guide you and know what you're doing and how to conduct yourself because it can get very the lines can get very blurred very quickly.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, it all comes down to being mindful, I think. Like if you actually like really reflect on a situation and ask yourself, is this going to backfire in my face? Or, is this going to potentially hurt somebody in some way if I say this or do this or whatever? I think like the world has gotten to a place where I don't think people actually stop and think anymore. They just act on impulse. And I think I've definitely tried to get to a place of being mindful. And if I read an email that pisses me off, I'm going to sit there for like a couple minutes, maybe like let it go for a couple days so I can just cool off or whatever, and then email back professionally. You know what I mean? Like it's people act on impulse, and it's just in hindsight after that, you're like, that was such a bad idea. Why did I do that? And so I think like just being mindful is so important. And like I think like a final thing we can touch on combining all of this is like basically like leadership in a way. Like if you're a professional person and you embody all these things, like you're reliable and you hold yourself accountable and you respect people's boundaries and you're good at communication and like you do all of those things, you're going to come off as like a very professional person and ultimately a really great leader, right? Like as a songwriter, independent artist, I'm basically the head of everything I do. I have people on my team, but this is my brand and essentially my career. I have to make it happen. And so embodying all of those traits makes me a strong leader, I think, because I'm able to get things done. I'm able to be professional while also making things fun for everybody and respecting everybody and creating that safe and wonderful place. And so I think that if you come off as this professional person who shows strength in many different areas, people will look to you and maybe be inspired, like, hey, like, they're doing a great job. Like, I wonder if I can learn from them. And then you just pass the torch on to other people and make them stronger and professional as well. And so it's just all about like your public persona and how you engage with people and how you put yourself out there and just establish a good reputation for yourself because that will come through.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right, and I think that's for a lot of independent musicians and artists that come through Voice of Women that I've seen and interviewed and talked to, that's exactly what they say to me, and, to kind of they are in charge of their own career, in charge of everything they do, everything, every single little thing, the things that annoy them, the things that frustrate them, the rejections, the failures, the things that they might not be so good at, and all those things and all those learning curves are so important. But it's also important to, I suppose, learn from that and take the lesson and not move on, but suppose move on and then learn from every experience that you have, whether it's good or not so good, and take that forward because it's you will learn, and if it's something you really really want to do, you will make it happen, and to just to be mindful of everything that can go on, and I suppose how things can go wrong, because that goes back to the quote, knowing what's right from wrong and still making choices you probably wouldn't have made. Um, that kind of goes right back to that, and that's pretty powerful stuff as well.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fabulous chat as well, all about professionalism. Before we go, what are some final thoughts you have? Maybe advice for anyone in this new year to help them become more professional?
I suppose it's about how you conduct yourself. Um, Professionalism, I suppose professionalism would be take out personal, I would say, in a lot of ways. Conduct yourself in a way that is respectful to everyone you come into contact with. Um, whatever whatever that is, if it's in an interview or if you're coming across a fan, when you're signing merch, that's still you being that's your profession, that's your job. But for the fan, it's not. So that it's how you conduct yourself in those situations, how you come across, and how kind you are, and how respectful you are to them. Um, and there's so many lessons to learn in this music industry. It's every day is a learning curve for everyone. and just enjoy the ride and, be as respectful and reliable and as professional as you have it in you to be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. It has been lovely having you back for a third time and this time to chat all about professionalism. Can you share with everyone where they can find you on social and check out all that you do?
Absolutely. They can find me on Twitter. It's voice_of a woman. They can find me on Instagram, which is voice.of a woman. You can find me on Facebook, which is Voice of a Woman 20. And you can also find me on Mixcloud. There's a lot of radio shows up on Mixcloud. And maybe one of these days you might find me on Spotify as well. But watch this space.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for joining me. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this chat with Linda all about professionalism. And I hope you can take what you learned into this new year. I think no matter if you're in the music industry or not, all of these things apply in whatever dream you're chasing, whatever job you're in. So just try to be as professional as possible. Have an incredible 2023. And of course, until next time,
Stay
stay
right
right
on
on
track.
track.